All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on something I know a lot of you have questions about, macro counting.
Yeah, macros can definitely seem pretty intimidating at first, especially if you're already feeling overwhelmed by all the conflicting nutrition advice out there.
Oh, absolutely. You've got like keto, paleo, intermittent fasting, and then there's all the clean eating trends. It can be tough to know where to even start. And then, the whole idea of tracking every single thing you eat, weighing out portions, it just sounds like a lot for a lot of people.
Right, it's like who has time for all that?
Yeah.
But that's exactly why we wanted to do this deep dive. We're going to break down all the fundamentals of macros, how to log your food effectively, figure out those nutrition labels, and even use things like, food scales and apps to make the whole process way easier.
Yeah, consider this your macro counting 101. And
Yeah.
just like learning anything new, whether it's like budgeting or, mastering a new software, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve.
Totally. It might feel a little clunky at first, like any new skill.
But that's totally normal. The key is like be patient with yourself. You don't have to be perfect right away. Even just getting a rough estimate of your calories for a few days is a great starting point. Just get into that habit of tracking. Consistency is way more important than being like super precise right off the bat.
I completely agree. All right, so let's start with the basics. What exactly are macros?
Okay, so when we talk about macros, we're really talking about macronutrients. They're like the building blocks of food that provide us with energy, which we measure in calories.
Right, and there are three main types of macros that we're focusing on: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins.
And each of these plays a super important role in our health, how we perform, in the gym or just in daily life, and also in our body composition.
Exactly. Like, think about it. If you're trying to build muscle or lose fat, or even just feel more energized throughout the day, understanding these macros and how they work is so crucial.
Okay, so let's break down each macro like one by one, starting with protein.
Okay, protein. So protein is all about growth and repair in the body. Think about building and repairing muscle tissue, producing hormones, all those essential processes.
Yeah. And you find protein in foods like meat, eggs, and like protein powder if you're into that kind of thing.
Right. And here's a key fact to remember. 1 gram of protein gives you about 4 calories.
Got it. Okay, so next up we have carbohydrates, carbs. What's the deal with those?
So carbs are your body's main source of energy, especially when you're working out or doing anything physically demanding.
Makes sense. I mean, you always hear about like carb loading before a big race or a tough workout.
Exactly. And you find carbs in tons of different foods: grains, fruits, vegetables, and they also provide about 4 calories per gram, just like protein.
Okay, so both protein and carbs have 4 calories per gram. I'm guessing fats are different.
Yep. Fats are a bit more energy dense. They pack about 9 calories per gram.
Wow, that's more than double. So that means like a small amount of fat can have a lot of calories.
That's right. But that doesn't mean fat is bad. In fact, it's really important for our health, too.
Right. Fats are essential for things like cell health and hormone production. And they help us absorb certain vitamins like vitamins A, D, E, and K.
Exactly. So we definitely don't want to be afraid of fats. It's all about finding the right balance for our individual needs and goals.
And good sources of fats include things like oils, butter, nuts, and seeds.
Right. And just like there are different types of carbs and protein, there are different types of fats too, each with their own unique properties and benefits.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into protein since we've got the calorie basics down.
All right, so protein is basically made up of these smaller units called amino acids. Think of amino acids like the Lego bricks that make up a protein structure.
I like that analogy. So, different amino acids link together to form all the different proteins in our bodies.
Precisely. And there are 20 different amino acids in total. And what's interesting is that our bodies can only produce some of them. The others, called essential amino acids, we have to get from our diet.
So, we need to make sure we're eating foods that contain all those essential amino acids. How many are there again?
There are 9 essential amino acids: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know.
Wow, that's a lot to remember. But hey, that's what we're here for, right? To break it all down.
Exactly. And then there are the non-essential amino acids, which our bodies can produce on their own, so we don't necessarily need to worry about getting them from our diet.
Okay, so 9 essential ones we need to eat, and the rest our bodies can make. Got it. Are those all the types of amino acids?
Well, there's also a third category called conditionally essential amino acids. These are kind of interesting. Usually our bodies can make them, but under certain conditions, like if we're sick or injured, we might need to get them from our diet.
So like extra support when our bodies are under stress.
Exactly. Some examples of those are arginine, cysteine, glutamine, glycine, proline, and tyrosine. But again, the specific need for these can vary depending on each individual.
Okay, so we've got our essential, non-essential, and conditionally essential amino acids. That covers protein pretty well. What about carbs? Let's talk about the different types of carbs.
All right, so the first type we have are simple carbohydrates. These are made up of shorter chains of sugar molecules, which means they're digested and absorbed into the bloodstream pretty quickly.
So like a quick burst of energy.
Exactly. Think of things like glucose, fructose, sucrose, that's your regular table, sugar, lactose, honey, fruit juices, and of course candy.
So basically the sweeter stuff, and then there are the complex carbs, right?
Right. Complex carbohydrates have longer chains of sugar molecules, so they take longer to break down and provide more sustained release of energy.
So they keep us feeling full and energized for longer.
Exactly. Good examples of complex carbs are things like potatoes, brown rice, whole wheat bread, broccoli, oats, and beans.
And I know we can't forget about fiber. It's technically a type of carb, right?
That's right. Dietary fiber is mostly indigestible plant material, which means it passes through our system without being absorbed. But that doesn't mean it's not important. In fact, it's essential for a healthy digestive system.
Yeah, fiber's like the unsung hero of the carb world. It keeps things moving, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. And there are two main types of fiber: soluble fiber, which dissolves in water and helps lower cholesterol, and insoluble fiber, which doesn't dissolve and adds bulk to our stools.
Okay, so that's carbs covered. Simple carbs for quick energy, complex carbs for sustained energy, and fiber for gut health. Now on to fats.
All right, fats. So fats are like the energy powerhouses. Remember, they provide more than double the calories per gram compared to proteins and carbs.
9 calories per gram, right? I'm starting to get the hang of this.
You got it. But like we mentioned earlier, fat isn't the enemy. It's actually crucial for so many bodily functions. It helps with cell structure, hormone production, and even helps us absorb those important fat-soluble vitamins.
Right. And there are different types of fats too, just like with carbs and protein. Let's break those down.
So first up, we have saturated fats. These are usually solid at room temperature and are mostly found in animal products like meat, butter, and cheese.
Okay, so the more solid fats, what about the liquid ones?
Those are usually unsaturated fats. They
Yeah.
come from plant sources like nuts, seeds, and oils.
Hmm.
And they're actually divided into two categories: monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats.
Okay, so saturated fats, mostly animal-based and solid. Unsaturated fats, mostly plant-based and liquid.
Got it. Are there any other types of fats we should know about?
Well, there's one more called trans fats, but we try to avoid those as much as possible.
Yeah, I've heard trans fats are pretty bad for us.
They are. They're actually artificially created fats that have been linked to a bunch of health problems. You might still find them in some processed foods, but for the most part, they've been phased out. Good riddance, I say. Okay, so we've covered all three macros: protein, carbs, and fats, along with their different types and functions. That's a lot of info, but I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
It's like putting together a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Each macronutrient plays a specific role in our bodies, and understanding those roles is key to optimizing our nutrition for our goals.
Exactly. But I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking, okay, this is all great, but why should I even bother counting macros? I mean, isn't it enough to just eat healthy in general?
Well, that's a good question. And the answer really depends on your individual goals. If you're just looking to improve your overall health and eat a balanced diet, then simply focusing on making healthy choices and incorporating a variety of nutrient-rich foods might be enough.
Right. But what if you have more specific goals, like wanting to lose fat, gain muscle, or improve your athletic performance?
That's where macro counting can really make a difference, because it allows you to fine-tune your nutrition to support those specific goals.
Okay, so let's say my goal is to lose fat. How would counting macros help me with that?
Well, to lose fat, you generally need to be in a calorie deficit, which means consuming fewer calories than your body burns each day.
Makes sense. But how do macros fit into that equation?
By tracking your macros, you can ensure that you're still eating enough protein to preserve muscle mass while you're in a calorie deficit. Because when you lose weight, you don't want to just lose muscle, right? You want to lose fat and maintain that lean muscle mass.
Right, that's super important. So counting macros can help me make sure I'm eating the right amount of protein even when I'm cutting calories. What about if I'm trying to gain muscle?
In that case, you need to be in a calorie surplus, meaning you're eating more calories than you're burning. And again, tracking your macros can help you make sure you're getting enough protein to support muscle growth and repair.
Yeah.
You might also adjust your carb and fat intake depending on your training regimen and how your body responds.
So whether you're trying to lose fat or gain muscle, counting macros can help you tailor your nutrition to support those goals more effectively. What about if I'm an athlete trying to improve my performance?
For athletes, macro counting can be super beneficial as well, because different types of training demand different nutritional needs. For example, an endurance athlete like a marathon runner might need a higher percentage of carbs in their diet to fuel those long runs, while a strength athlete might benefit from more protein and healthy fats.
So again, it's about fine-tuning your nutrition to match your specific activity level and goals. And beyond those specific goals, I think tracking macros can also be a really helpful tool for just becoming more aware of what you're actually eating.
Oh, absolutely. It's like shining a light on your eating habits. You might be surprised by how many calories or how much sugar you're actually consuming without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's easy to underestimate portion sizes or to mindlessly snack throughout the day. And that's where tracking can really help you identify those areas where you might be overdoing it or where you could make some healthier choices.
Exactly. And once you have that awareness, you can start making more conscious decisions about what you're putting into your body.
Okay, so we've established the why behind counting macros. Now let's talk about the how. Like, how do we actually set those personalized macro goals and targets?
So if you're using an app like MacroFactor, it actually does a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
Right, MacroFactor asks you a bunch of questions about your goals, activity level, and all that good stuff, and then it generates those personalized macro targets for you.
Exactly. But even if you're not using MacroFactor, it's still super helpful to understand the concepts and calculations involved.
Absolutely. So let's start with the most important concept, TDE, Total Daily Energy Expenditure.
Right. Your TDEE is basically the total number of calories your body burns in a day. And it's influenced by a bunch of factors. Your age, your height, your weight, your sex, how active you are, even your genetics play a role.
So it's like a personalized calorie budget, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once you know your TDE, you can then adjust your calorie intake accordingly to either lose weight, gain weight, or maintain your current weight.
Okay, so how do we figure out our TDEE? Is there a magic formula?
Well, there are formulas and calculators, but even those are just estimates.
Right, because everyone's metabolism is different and
Mhm.
everyone's activity level is different.
Exactly. So there's no one-size-fits-all answer. But we can break down TDE into its main components to get a better understanding of what's involved.
Okay, let's do that. What are those components?
So the first component is your basal metabolic rate, or BMR. This is basically the number of calories your body burns at rest, just to keep all your vital functions going.
So like breathing, heart rate, organ function, all that stuff.
Exactly. And your BMR is influenced by things like your body size, your age, and your sex.
Okay, so BMR is like the baseline calorie burn. What else is there?
Then there's the thermic effect of food, or TF. This is the number of calories your body burns digesting and processing food.
So like our bodies actually burn calories just by eating.
That's right. It takes energy to break down and absorb nutrients from food.
Interesting. So we've got BMR and TKF. What else?
Next up is exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's the number of calories you burn during exercise.
Right, so the more active you are, the higher your EAT.
Exactly. And finally, we have non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. This is all the calories you earn doing everything else that isn't sleeping, eating, or planned exercise.
So like walking around, fidgeting, doing chores, even just standing up burns calories.
That's right. And NEAT can actually vary a lot from person to person, depending on their lifestyle and job.
Wow, I never realized how many different factors contribute to our calorie expenditure throughout the day.
It's a complex system for sure. But by understanding these components, you can start to see how your individual activity level and lifestyle choices play a role in determining your overall TDEE.
Right, so if someone wants to increase their TDEE, they could focus on things like being more active throughout the day, incorporating more strength training into their routine, or even just fidgeting more.
Exactly. And those small changes can actually add up over time.
Okay, so we have a better understanding of TDEE and its components, but how do we actually calculate it?
Well, there are a lot of different formulas and online calculators you can use, but like we mentioned earlier, those are just estimates. The most accurate way to determine your TDEE is to track your calorie intake and weight changes over a period of time and see how your body responds.
Right. And that's where an app like MacroFactor can be really helpful because it takes all that data into account and constantly adjusts your calorie targets based on your progress.
Exactly. But if you're not using an app, you can still get a decent estimate using an online calculator and then adjust based on your individual results.
Okay, so let's say I figured out my TDEE. What's the next step in setting my macro targets?
Well, once you know your TDEE, you can then determine how many calories you need to eat each day to either lose weight, gain weight, or maintain your current weight.
Right, so if my TDEE is 2,000 calories and I want to lose weight, I'd need to eat less than 2,000 calories per day.
Exactly. And how much less depends on how quickly you want to lose weight. A general recommendation is to aim for a calorie deficit around 500 calories per day for a sustainable rate of weight loss.
Okay, so I'd aim to eat around 1,500 calories per day in that case. But how do I determine how many of those calories should come from each macroprotein, carbs, and fat?
That's where things get a bit more individualized. There are general recommendations for macro ratios depending on your goals, but the best approach is to experiment and see how your body responds.
So there's no one-size-fits-all answer here either.
Not really, but we can provide some general guidelines. For example, if your goal is to build muscle, you might want to aim for a higher protein intake, somewhere between zero point 0.8 and 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight.
Okay, so if I weigh 150 pounds, I'd aim for between 120 and 150 grams of protein per day. What about carbs and fat?
The amounts of carbs and fat you eat will depend on your activity level, your individual preferences, and how your body responds to different macro ratios. Some people do well on higher carb diets, while others prefer a higher fat approach.
So it's all about finding what works best for you.
Exactly. And that's where tracking and experimenting can be really helpful. You can start with a certain macro ratio and then adjust it based on how you feel, how your workouts are going, and how your body composition is changing.
So it's like a constant feedback loop.
Exactly.
Mm.
And over time, you'll start to get a better sense of what macro ratio works best for you and your goals.
Okay, so we've covered TDEE, calorie deficits and surpluses, and macro ratios. I think we have a pretty good grasp of how to set those initial macro targets. Now let's get into the practical side of things. How to actually find and track those macros in the foods we eat.
All right, so when it comes to finding macro information, there are two main sources: nutrition labels and online databases.
Right, most packaged foods have nutrition labels, but what about things like fresh produce or meals we cook at home?
That's where online databases come in handy. Websites like the USDA Food Data Central have nutritional information for tons of different foods.
So we can just search for the food we're eating and it'll tell us the macros.
Pretty much. You might need to specify certain details, like whether the food is raw or cooked, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, so let's talk about nutrition labels first. What are the key things we should be looking for?
All right, so the first thing you want to check on a nutrition label is the serving size. This tells you how much of the food is considered one serving.
Right, because sometimes a serving size is smaller than you might think. Like a serving of chips might only be a handful, but who actually eats just a handful of chips?
Exactly. So it's important to pay attention to that serving size and adjust the macro values accordingly if you're eating more than one serving.
Okay, so serving size is key. What else?
Then you want to look at the calorie count per serving. This tells you how much energy you're getting from that amount of food.
Right. And after calories, we've got our three main macros: fat, carbohydrates, and protein.
Exactly. And the label will list the grams of each of those per serving. So you can easily see how much of each macro you're getting.
And some labels also include information about things like sugar, fiber, cholesterol, and sodium. Are those important for macro counting?
Not really. Those are more for general health awareness.
Yeah.
For macro counting, we're really just focusing on the calories, fat, carbs, and protein.
Got it. Okay, so that covers nutrition labels. Now let's talk about those online databases. What are some good ones to use?
The USDA Food Data Central is a really good one. It's a huge database that's run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it's free to use.
Okay, USDA Food Data Central. I have to check that out. Any other good options?
There are a bunch of other websites and apps out there, but the USDA one is a really good starting point. And most food tracking apps will have their own built-in databases as well.
Right. Speaking of tracking apps, I know we're both big fans of MacroFactor.
Absolutely. MacroFactor is awesome because it not only tracks your macros, but it also learns your individual calorie needs over time and adjusts your targets accordingly.
Yeah, it's like having a personalized nutrition coach in your pocket. But even if you're not using an app like MacroFactor, the principles of macro counting are the same.
Exactly. Whether you're tracking on paper, using a spreadsheet, or using an app, The key is to be consistent and pay attention to the details.
Okay, so we've talked about how to find macro information. Now let's get into the actual logging process. What are some best practices for measuring food and making sure our logs are accurate?
Well, the most accurate way to measure food is to use a food scale. This ensures that you're getting the most precise measurements possible.
Yeah, I used to think food scales were just for like super serious bodybuilders or something. But once I started using one, I realized how helpful they are for anyone who wants to track their macros accurately.
Absolutely. It really takes the guesswork out of portion sizes.
And once you get used to weighing your food, you start to develop a better sense of what different portion sizes actually look like, which can be helpful when you're eating out or don't have a scale handy.
Exactly. And there are tons of affordable food scales available online or at kitchen stores. You don't need anything fancy.
Right. And most food scales have a tare function, which is super helpful for measuring food directly into bowls or containers.
Oh yeah, the tare function is a lifesaver. It basically zeroes out the weight of the container, so you're only measuring the weight of the food itself.
Okay, so food scales are ideal for accurate measurement. But what if you don't have a scale or you're in a situation where you can't use one?
In those cases, you can use measuring cups and spoons. Just make sure you're using them correctly.
Yeah.
Like for liquids, you want to use a liquid measuring cup and make sure you're reading the measurement at eye level.
Right, and for dry ingredients, you want to use dry measuring cups and level off the ingredient with a straight edge to get an accurate measurement.
Exactly. And even if you're using a food scale, it can be helpful to have measuring cups and spoons on hand to help you visualize different portion sizes.
Okay, so we've covered measuring tools. Any other tips for accurate logging?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest tip is to log as you go. Don't wait until the end of the day to try and remember everything you ate.
Right, because that's when you start forgetting things or underestimating portion sizes.
Exactly. So if you eat something, log it right away. Most tracking apps make it super easy to do this right from your phone.
And don't forget about the little things, like condiments, sauces, and drinks. Those calories can add up quickly.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's easy to forget about the spoonful of mayo in your sandwich or the creamer in your coffee. But those things all contribute to your overall calorie and macro intake.
Okay, so log as you go, and don't forget the little things. Any other common pitfalls we should be aware of?
Well, one thing that trips a lot of people up is logging food raw versus cooked.
Right, because the calorie and macro content can change when you cook food. Like a cup of raw spinach will have way fewer calories than a cup of cooked spinach because it wilts down so much.
Exactly. So it's important to be consistent with how you log things. If you're weighing and logging your food raw, make sure you select the raw entry in your tracking app or database. And if you're logging it cooked, make sure you choose the cooked entry.
And most databases will specify whether a food is raw or cooked in the description. If it doesn't say, it's usually safe to assume it's raw.
Right. And if you're ever unsure, it's always best to err on the side of caution and choose the lower calorie option.
Okay, so raw versus cooked is something to be mindful of. What about those situations where you just can't track everything perfectly? Like, what if you're at a restaurant or a friend's house and you don't know the exact ingredients or calorie counts?
Those situations can be tricky, but you can still make educated guesses. If you're at a restaurant, you can try looking up the menu online beforehand or searching for similar dishes in your tracking app.
Right. And if you're at a friend's house, you can just do your best to estimate portion sizes and make reasonable guesses about the ingredients.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent and doing the best you can with the information you have.
Okay, so even in those less than ideal situations, we can still make an effort to track our intake. What about those times when we totally fall off the wagon and like completely forget to track for a day or two? Does that ruin everything?
Not necessarily. It happens to everyone. The key is to just jump back on track as soon as possible.
Right. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just get back to logging consistently.
Exactly. And if you're using an app like MacroFactor, it can actually adjust for those missed days and help you get back on track.
And so it's like having a forgiving nutrition coach who understands that life happens.
Pretty much. All right, so I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about what macros are, why they're important, how to set personalized macro targets, and how to track them effectively.
Yeah, this has been a super informative deep dive, and I hope our listeners feel more confident and empowered to start incorporating macro counting into their own nutrition journeys.
Me too. And remember, it's all about finding what works best for you and your individual goals.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, and the most important thing is to be consistent and enjoy the process.
Absolutely. And if you're struggling, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are tons of resources available, including coaches, dietitians, and online communities.
And of course, there's MacroFactor, which can make the whole process a lot easier and more manageable.
Definitely. So to wrap things up, here's a little challenge for our listeners.
I love a good challenge. What is it?
For the next week, I challenge you to pick one meal or snack that you eat regularly and track it consistently using a food scale or measuring cups.
Okay, that's doable. And what's the purpose of this challenge?
It's all about building awareness. By tracking that one meal or snack consistently, you'll start to get a better sense of its calorie and macro content. And that awareness can then inform your choices moving forward.
That's a great idea. And it's a small step that can lead to big changes over time.
Exactly. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
And happy tracking, everyone!